So we're going back on stage again. We're going to be live in the Cork Opera House on March 30th for a very special event, which is going to form part of the Cork Podcast Festival. Our show is called Look Who's Talking. It's going to be all about those criminals. How do we get them into studio? How do we get up close and personal with them? And what have they got to say when the cameras are off? So Cork Opera House, tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie, 30th of March. See you there.
So we're returning to the story about the conviction of 3 men for a gang rape that occurred in Dublin, partly because, you know, I got a couple of questions from people about, like, who are these guys? Like, because the crime is so horrific. And the fact that people are saying kind of these seem like, you know, just regular people. So we have had some more information really about the men in the meantime.
Yes.
And it kind of, I suppose it brings up a couple of issues in that these weren't people that had been, you know, people were wary of. These were, you know, functional businessmen. But one of them in particular, well, remind us of the case first, Eimear, I suppose.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, 3 men, their names are Fabio Vicente, Anthony Hickey and Matin Zolfaghari, were convicted of raping a woman. I think they had been charged, or they had gone on trial accused of 7 counts of rape and were found guilty on 6 counts. So this all happened in 2019. Essentially, the woman was in a nightclub with a friend, a Dublin nightclub, and got kind of, it was described as silly chat with a group of men. They obviously were drinking, enjoying themselves. Her friend went home and she said she'd follow them. And then the woman described, you know, things as becoming very hazy. She said, I believed I was drugged. And she basically has vague memories of being in an SUV car. And essentially, so she said she was subjected to rape and oral rape in the car, and then ended up in a house where she said she was again raped and attacked by the men. And then she woke up the next day next to one of the men, Anthony Hickey. And I suppose as soon as she got out of the house, she went to her friend and raised the alarm. And obviously, a couple of weeks ago, they fought the case and tried to claim that it was consensual. But I suppose a big element of the case were video clips.
I mean, like in part, you know, we hear a pretty normal defence in these situations where the woman is described as being drunk. You know, but she accepts.
Yeah.
You know, she doesn't have a clear recollection of what happened in the car. She obviously felt like she was spiked, though the tests didn't show that.
No.
So then she basically describes waking up in the car and being raped, and that occurring again in the house.
Yeah.
So what happens in the aftermath is these guys are questioned. At some point, the guard sees their phones. They go through the phones and they find a series of WhatsApp messages between some of them, in particular between, I think it's...
Hickey and Zolf.
Yeah, and Hickey asks Zolfaghari, if that's the correct pronunciation, send me that clip of your one, he says. And he then gets sent a clip he then gets sent a clip basically of the woman. And at some point, the guard's describing, you know, he gets another text saying, listen to your one saying no. Basically.
Yeah, you listen to you laughing after she says no.
Yeah.
And obviously there was heard a lot on that recording. There was 2 clips, and the second clip wasn't audible, and the first clip I think was about 30 seconds long. But I suppose the case they tried to build around it was, it was consensual, but the reason she was saying no there was because we tried to get her to be involved in anal sex, and she said no.
Yeah.
But obviously the jury ultimately believed her that she was saying no completely.
Yeah, and she described, like she initially had said she was in a taxi, and that proved not to be the case. It proved to be an SUV driven by
Vicente.
Driven by Vicente. So I suppose all of those things, like these are the cases that we get this constant controversy with the DPP about what cases are brought or not. I mean, we have had high profile cases where we've heard charges were not proceeded with on the basis that the woman's recollection was too impacted by drink and drugs. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Now, so those men, I think one of the reporters who was in court, neither of us were, but one of them described the men as being really shocked when they were being led away basically to jail, where they remain on remand waiting the sentencing. So it's a gang rape. I mean, that's what it's described as. But, I suppose the shock of it is, or part of the shock is the fact that these guys appear really, really normal.
Yeah.
And we have heard more about them in the meantime. And that's kind of why we're coming back to it, having covered it. For example, Vicente is he's a Portuguese national originally. And we found out a bit about his background and what he's been up to in Ireland since he came to live here.
Yeah, so he's lived in Ireland for about 10 years, and we have pictures in the Sunday World on Sunday, obviously, where he's wearing soldier outfit in his photographs. He worked for the Portuguese Navy. He was a special ops. That was how it was described. And then he obviously came to Ireland, and he has several businesses. So he's actually got a strip business registered under his name, and then he has 2 fitness businesses registered on the company registrars account website. But I suppose what has kind of made the story newsworthy again is that there's been several stories about the men and, their work and sort of how they were well-known members of the community in the fitness industry. So one of them, Anthony Hickey, he worked in a South Dublin gym, and we've had people tell us that he was very well known in this gym and he was very popular with women. And there was actually a group of women that were described as Anto's angels. So he had a lot of classes that were always busy, always popular. So people were just sort of like taken aback by this. And then I suppose the more sensational element of it then is Fabio Vicente, who also worked in a gym in Dublin, from what we've heard, that he as we know, had a strip company registered to his name, but also was working as a stripper while this case was going on, because these complaints were made. This case happened in 2019, and it's only after coming to court now this year. But
yeah, they would have been investigated for many, many years before it occurred. I mean, so when these cases come out, we always get people contact us on social media and phones, and who will know the guys. And the Anthony Hickey one is interesting because we did get a call from somebody who said, well, he was very, very popular, and he was kind of a cheeky chappy, and people would have thought he was one of those guys who maybe had a bit of a sketchy sort of background, but had really come good and was a really sort of honourable, respected person. We also got calls about Vicente, about the stripping business. Now, he wasn't, what we've been told is he wasn't one of these guys in one of these troupes that do the shows, but he was more of a strippogram, I suppose, really, that would be called out to parties, and he was operating mostly in the sort of South Dublin, Wicklow area, and that, people would bring him in for a birthday party, or, mostly probably birthday parties. And that, but one person did describe at one of these birthday parties how he was, because they're generally, not that I know a lot about the hiring male strippers. Well, I haven't hired many males. But, most of these things, they're stripograms. They're not really raunchy performances, are they? They're mostly for fun. Women hire male strippers
for hen parties and stuff.
Yeah, but not. So
it's for the hilarious. Yeah, it's for the kind of the shock of it, and it's not generally I actually don't think I've been to as much as they say they're that common. I don't think I've been to any hen parties with strippers, but they don't tend to get down. They don't tend to get naked.
Yeah,
they can be, I suppose, they're hired, so whatever you request of them. But what we had been told is that despite not being asked to do this, that Vicente in this particular party got completely naked and basically, as we described, did the full Monty.
Yeah, and kind of inappropriately in a sort of family setting now, and people were genuinely shocked. Now, he's ran a business, he registered a business for that stripping. So, we did get a couple of calls about these guys in that, that these are sort of, I suppose, very well integrated into the community. The third man, Matin Zolfaghari, if that's how it's pronounced, we've also been contacted about him, and he's also been on social media, I suppose, a lot, like all of them.
Yeah.
And he was a particular kind of Conor McGregor fanboy, I suppose.
Yeah, there's a picture of him celebrating with McGregor after a win in like 2013, so a long time ago now, but seems to have been documenting McGregor's career and his wins on his social media. And he was also training in the Straight Pass gym, which has been obviously is associated with McGregor. And so he was kind of involved in that fitness industry as well, but seemed to be a big fan of McGregor and definitely wasn't shy on social media.
No, I mean, you can see the social media posts and they're, what would you say, controversial to say the least, some of them.
Yeah.
So these guys, they're due back in court. Is it next month, is it?
Yeah, I think it's March 10th. They're due back in courts for sentencing. So obviously there will be victim impact statements heard and then their sentence will be delivered. Obviously with rape you can get up to life.
Yeah.
But there'll be various different things taken into account. And obviously the victim will get to have her say as she should in relation to her the victim impact, I mean.
I mean, it was an unusual case in another way in that the victim gave evidence from behind a screen. She described the men in court, she said they were strangers to her then and they're strangers to her now.
Yeah.
Like she never had any contact with them before, didn't, know who they were and didn't, hasn't ever had contact with them again.
Yeah.
They obviously they gave particular defenses about consent, saying that, and they're in as part of the defense it was put forward that, just because somebody is drunk, it doesn't mean they're not capable of giving consent.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes to the heart of this case, I suppose, and at what point is if somebody is so drunk they can't give consent, I suppose, is how the law will look at it quite clearly.
Yeah.
But that blurred line, it's been a feature in many cases that we've covered in recent times.
It has. And the men's defence tried to say that they actually believed that she was capable of giving consent because there was like 160 hours of CCTV footage showed as part of this case, and they said that you seem okay. And they also referenced how, she had said that everything was hazy and the only intoxicant found in her system other than alcohol was cocaine. And they gave her, the alcohol level in her blood and everything. And they tried to say, you weren't impossible to give consent. But she said, no, I didn't give consent. And I suppose the thing was, beyond that argument that can often create a lot of debate about are you too drunk to give consent? She's also clearly saying, I said no regardless. She just said no, and she can be heard in the video clip. And she seemed to be very coherent in her evidence because there was evidence given of how she had marks to her neck and marks to her arms and legs. And at one point, one of the men's defense lawyers or defense team said to her, I think it was Hickey, was he particularly violent to you? And she said, no, but she said, I consider rape violence.
Yeah.
So she did hold herself and she clearly put her case there and it was believed obviously by the jury.
And these are the cases that I suppose there was always a sense traditionally that they couldn't come to court and they couldn't be proven if there was a level of intoxication or a flawed memory of parts of it.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this case was very much strengthened by the video evidence that was given as part of it. But we have seen other cases recently, like for example, the rugby trial in France where that issue has been explored. And I think there is certainly in that case as well, we saw Irish rugby players get really, really lengthy sentences for after the case was proven.
Yeah, so Dennis Coulson, who's Irish and played rugby for Ireland, I think he's since left that career, but obviously he's well known for that. Yeah. He was convicted along with two other men of rape, so essentially gang rape again, and has been sentenced up to 14 years in a jail in France, but he is appealing that at the moment. But the shocking element of this case, I suppose, was the really graphic details of what was done to this girl. So essentially she and a few pals met these rugby players on a night out after they'd had a loss, and went back to a hotel with them. And she was described as being so drunk that she was almost at the point of being poisoned, like of alcohol poisoning. And you can clearly see, it was heard that it could be clearly seen in footage that she was really, really intoxicated. So she went back to the hotel room and she woke up the next day, and it was a really graphic evidence of how basically there was implements found in her vagina, including bottles and crutches. So she obviously took this case, and I suppose what's really shocking is how she was kind of treated in court by the defense teams. They were essentially saying, well, you went back with them. What were you kind of expecting to happen? And it was also told how the men had described her as trollops and all this kind of thing. So I suppose that whole culture of, these cases being a bit messy, but that doesn't mean that these people aren't victims and that they don't deserve justice, has really kind of been brought home with that case and this case too. But I suppose what I thought was, very interesting was how the victim reacted to the conviction through her lawyer. The lawyer gave a statement and said that, it's a very strong signal sent to the men of this country, to the world of rugby and to women too. And she also said, ladies, you are free to get drunk, to go out, to dress as you want. This freedom is priceless. We wanted to call it into question. You are not the cause of the danger. So I think that's really sending a strong message, and that's what you're alluding to, that, people kind of maybe back in the day would have associated rape with, the strange or someone being dragged into bushes off the street. But the reality of the cases that we're seeing lately are, people are out, they might be enjoying themselves. They might have things like, alcohol or drugs taken, and then they are attacked. But because of the other circumstances, and because, the accused are, pleading not guilty and claiming consent was given, it creates this grey area. And, it's kind of been used as a reason to sort of say, well, of course, she doesn't remember because she was doing X, Y, and Z. But this sort of is very clear message that, that doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it okay.
And it doesn't make it okay. And also that a jury can assess evidence and reach a conclusion that they can, because the juries are told, if you're in a court, they'll be told to rely on their own life experience and their own common sense before reaching a judgment. And I suppose these cases show that people are capable of maybe understanding, that people do go out and get drunk, and understanding that still doesn't mean that something hasn't happened.
Of course.
So the DPP, I don't know what the statistics are for, sex assault or sex attack claims, but the percentage of them that actually reach a court are very, very small for one reason or another. But one of those reasons is because once the guards investigate something, it then has to go to the DPP. And many of these cases, unless there is some sort of corroboration of some sort of time, they can fall. So, I mean, I think the statistic is like, the vast majority, even when somebody makes a complaint, makes a formal statement, the vast majority of them never see the inside of a court. And, campaigners in the area of sexual violence have often, highlighted that and sought to have these cases at least come before a jury.
Yeah.
And then let a jury assess it,
And they speak as well of the re-victimization of, victims of sexual abuse when they're going through this legal system because of how they're treated. And I think there is that, that has begun to change, and you do see it with how people giving evidence in court are being dealt with. And even in this case, the victim of these three men in the Dublin gang rape was very strong in her evidence. And in the closing speeches, the defense of this man, they said, we're not saying that she's a liar, but we're just saying that the evidence she's giving doesn't go far enough to a conviction of rape. But if you compare that to, I remember, victims of rape back in the 90s or early 2000s, one woman I remember describing how basically her underwear was shown in court during a rape case in Cork. So I think that is changing, and that's a good thing, because, these people, these women, as you said, there isn't a huge proportion of them being actually going to trial in the first place. So they should be able to give their evidence, and it should be judged on based on objectively on that evidence without them feeling like they are being put on trial. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, we'll come back to this case when the sentencing occurs, but the men are currently in prison.
Yeah.
And, that's an indication of what sort of sentence they're going to receive.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks, Eimear.
Thanks, Niall.
Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.